I took a long, hot sip of my coffee that morning, the kind of quiet, strong coffee you only get on a ranch, and nearly choked, sputtering half of it back into the mug when I read the envelope. It wasn't a bill, wasn't a tax notice, nothing routine, no. It was something far, far worse. Something you have to be truly entitled to even conceive of. According to this pristine, officially stamped document, my 50 acres, the very heart of the Monroe Ranch, the same land my grandfather had broken his back working, the land I'd poured every dime of my sweat and beer money into for 15 years, was no longer entirely mine. It was, effective immediately, designated as community land for the entire neighborhood. I remember squinting at the words, reading them once, reading them twice, and then doing the only logical thing a sane person could do. I burst out laughing. It was a harsh, ugly sound, the kind of laugh that comes when reality bends into a sick joke. But the laughter died in my throat when I got to the part that said all existing fences, barriers, and private property signage must be removed in accordance with their ridiculous, self-proclaimed HOA guidelines. That was the moment my coffee mug met the cold stone floor, shattering into 100 little pieces of porcelain and spreading that dark, hot liquid all over the place, and I felt a creeping, consuming rage curl up in my chest. These people, these strangers who lived on smaller plots miles away, were actually genuinely serious about trying to steal my home. An hour later, I was standing at the main gate, the sun just starting to burn off the morning mist, when a tan sedan with a truly ridiculous faux gold HOA logo on the door rolled up my driveway, slow and smug, like it owned the damned cattle guards. The door popped open, and out stepped Margaret Dawson, a middle-aged woman with a figure trying desperately to escape a blazer that was at least 3 sizes too small. She was holding her clipboard like it was a judicial mace, and strutted up to me with that specific, patronizing confidence only people who have never been told no, let alone punched in the face, possess. Hovering behind her like 2 well-dressed vultures over a carcass were 2 other board members, equally smug, equally overdressed for a ranch visit. "Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey and fake concern. "We sent you the notice regarding the community land designation, and we'd like to discuss the next steps for seamless transition." I just stood there, my arms crossed tight over my chest, staring at her, letting the silence stretch until it became thick and uncomfortable, listening to the buzzing of the flies. "Next steps?" I finally asked, my voice dangerously low. "Yeah, I got a next step for you. It's called trespassing laws." Margaret let out a small, airy chuckle, the kind that screamed she found me endearingly stupid. "Oh, I think there's a misunderstanding. Jack, you see, our board voted unanimously to include your land within the jurisdiction. Since your ranch has historically been accessible to community members for hiking and leisure." Historically, I cut her off, taking a hard step forward. "The only thing this land has historically been used for is ranching. And Margaret, my land is not, has never been, and will never be part of your HOA." She gave me that condescending, pitying smile. "It is now," she chirped. I just stared. She actually truly believed this nonsense. She believed a little vote in a stuffy clubhouse overruled a century of land deeds and ownership. I looked at her 2 lackeys behind her, both nodding along like wind-up dolls, and felt a sudden, powerful urge to grab Margaret's ridiculous clipboard and snap it over my knee. Instead, I forced the air out of my lungs and made my voice stay flat and even. "Let me get this straight," I said, leaning in. "You people, who don't own a single blade of grass on this entire 50 acres, held a little vote and decided my private, deeded property belongs to you. Not to us, Mr. Monroe," she corrected, tilting her head as if speaking to a slow child. "To the community." I was still processing the sheer breathtaking insanity of that word, community, when a silver SUV, followed by a dark sedan, came rolling up the driveway. The doors popped open, and out spilled a family of 4, complete with a golden retriever, and a second group carrying a picnic basket. They set off toward my prime pasture, laughing, like they were strolling through a public city park. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," I shouted, marching straight toward them, the cold fury instantly turning hot. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The dad, A balding guy in a ridiculously bright golf shirt just smiled at me like I was the one who was interrupting things. "Oh, Margaret said the HOA opened up this land for public use," he said, tossing a frisbee to his son. "Figured we'd check it out." Margaret, who had trotted after me, placed a firm, sticky hand on my shoulder. "Jack, this is exactly what we were talking about, honey. Community members enjoying their space." I shrugged her hand off like she was a mosquito. "This isn't your space. This is my land." The wife looked genuinely puzzled. "But the HOA said—" "I don't give a damn what the HOA said," I roared, the composure finally fracturing. "Get off my property, now!" The husband frowned, clutching his frisbee. "No need to be rude, buddy." I was about to inform him that he was 3 seconds from getting his golf shoes filled with a truly impressive amount of cattle manure when I looked up and saw more cars arriving, turning my ranch into a bizarre real-time public invasion. It felt like a nightmare you couldn't wake up from. I spun back to Margaret, my voice shaking with raw anger. "Get these people off my land now!" Her eyes widened in that mock innocent way she had. "Oh, Jack, there's no need for hostility. This transition will be easier if we all just work together." I stepped close, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper, forcing her to lean in. "Margaret, I swear on my granddaddy's grave, if you don't get off my property and take your little community with you, I will personally escort you down this driveway with a high-pressure garden hose." That finally got a flicker of real emotion. Her smugness faltered for half a second before she recovered with a pinched look. "Well," she sniffed, adjusting her blazer, "I suppose we'll have to escalate this matter legally." She turned on her heel and stormed back to her tan sedan, her 2 minions scuttling behind her. As the trespassers sheepishly shuffled back to their cars, Margaret rolled down her window and gave me one last icy look. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer, Mr. Monroe." I grinned, a slow, low, mean smile that felt absolutely primal. "You'll be hearing from my shotgun," I whispered, though she probably heard it anyway. The moment their car tires hit the paved county road, I grabbed my phone and dialed Curtis McGraw. Curtis wasn't just a lawyer. He was the kind of guy who made a living off systematically dismantling overreaching HOAs. He answered on the first ring, probably knowing exactly what kind of Saturday morning I was having. "Curtis," I said, "I've got a Category 5 Kerren situation." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in his air-conditioned office, laying out the entire ridiculous saga. He listened, nodding slowly, occasionally making a note on a yellow pad. When I finished, he leaned back, chewing on the end of his pen. "The classic HOA land grab," he sighed, sounding like a man who'd seen too much injustice involving garden gnomes and flagpoles. "They don't have legal grounds, Jack. They're banking on you rolling over and hating confrontation. So, how do I stop them?" I demanded. Curtis smirked, the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. "You don't just stop them, Jack, you fight dirty." I leaned forward, adrenaline pumping. "I'm listening." "First thing you do," he instructed, tapping his pen on his desk, "is you make it utterly impossible for them to use that land. You need maximum undeniable deterrence. Fences, signs, the works." "Already got fences," I muttered. "Not that they care." "Then you electrify them," Curtis said, his grin turning wicked. "Non-lethal, perfectly within county regulations, but enough voltage to send a firm, memorable message. You turn that community land into a fortress." The idea was crazy. It was extreme. It was beautiful. I loved it. I spent the next morning at the county records office digging through every legal document about the HOA's jurisdiction. As expected, my land was never, ever part of their territory. But Margaret had been busy. She had filed paperwork claiming an annexation of my property into the HOA, citing some obscure, long-dead community development clause. It was nonsense. Pure legal fiction. But it was the kind of fiction that could cost me everything if I didn't hit back hard. That afternoon, I marched into the HOA's office, which was exactly the stuffy, overly floral, sad little room attached to the community clubhouse I expected it to be. Margaret sat behind a desk looking smug and shuffling paper. She barely glanced up. "Jack," she said, that syrupy voice making my skin crawl, "I assume you're here to discuss compliance with the new regulations." I didn't say a word. I just slapped a thick manila folder onto her desk. "Actually, Margaret, I'm here to give you a bill." She arched a perfectly tweezed eyebrow and opened the folder. Inside were the official county documents confirming my land had never been under their jurisdiction, followed by a detailed invoice. Since she claimed my property was now part of the association, that meant they owed me. Specifically, they owed me 20 years' worth of unpaid HOA dues for the land they had supposedly managed. The total I had meticulously typed at the bottom. $205,800. Margaret's face went a shade of pale I hadn't thought possible. That weekend, the HOA decided to test my resolve in the most ridiculous way possible. They organized a massive community picnic on my land. I wasn't even surprised when I saw dozens of people setting up folding chairs, blankets, and grills, right smack in the middle of my pasture. It was as if my ranch had officially become a public park overnight, and they were determined to ignore my new, humming perimeter. I watched from my porch, sipping a cold beer, waiting for the inevitable. It didn't take long. One overly eager jogger, headphones blasting, completely oblivious, ran straight into the new fence line. There was a loud, satisfying crackle, a high-pitched yelp, and then a very ungraceful stumble backward onto the gravel. A few feet away, a group of kids playing soccer kicked their ball into the wire, and when one little guy tried to retrieve it, he got a nice little zap that sent him yelping back to his parents. Screams. Confusion, beautiful, beautiful chaos. Margaret was the first to recover, storming through the crowd, red-faced and absolutely livid. "This is illegal," she shrieked, pointing her clipboard at me on the porch. "No, it's not," I called back. "Checked with the county. Perfectly within regulations, non-lethal, too. Just a friendly reminder to stay off private property, Margaret. You're a menace." She spat. "No," I corrected, slowly raising my beer. "I'm a landowner. Something you seem to have trouble understanding." The next day, I received a formal cease and desist letter. I forwarded it to Curtis, who practically cackled on the phone. "They really think they can bully you, Jack? This is getting fun." He drafted a counter-demand. If the HOA insisted on claiming my land as community property, then they were financially responsible for its upkeep, security, liability insurance, and the back taxes. By the time he crunched the numbers, the total liability was so enormous the HOA would have to start charging. Every homeowner triple just to cover the costs Margaret's foolishness had created. The financial pressure immediately broke the board. Homeowners were furious, and a petition started circulating demanding Margaret's resignation. 2 days later, Margaret was at my gate again, looking less confident, less polished. "Mr. Monroe," she started, her voice strained, "the board has reconsidered its stance. We are willing to discuss a peaceful resolution." "I'm listening," I replied, leaning on the fence. "If you agree to remove the fences," she swallowed hard, "we'll drop all HOA claims on your land. Effective immediately." I took a long, dramatic sip of my coffee. Tempting. "But here's the thing, Margaret. I like my fences, and I really like watching you squirm." Her face tightened. "This is extortion." "No, this is justice," I said. "You tried to steal my land, you lost, and now you're going to do exactly what I say. You will vote to officially remove the ranch from the HOA jurisdiction, and you will cover my legal fees." Her nostrils flared, but with visible effort she gave a stiff nod. "Fine, we will vote." "Good, now get out of here. The war wasn't over yet, but I had won the battle." Margaret's defeat should have been the end of it, but people like her don't just roll over. So I stayed ready. I reinforced the fences, added even more cameras, and kept Curtis on speed dial. A week later, I started noticing things. Board members speaking in hushed voices with residents who used to be Margaret's loyalists. The neighborhood felt like it was shifting. It all came to a head at the next HOA emergency meeting. I wouldn't normally bother with one of their little neighborhood cult gatherings, but this time they were discussing Margaret's removal, and I wasn't going to miss the show. I arrived early, taking a seat in the back. Margaret walked in, and the tension in the room thickened into a physical mass. She looked pale, controlled, but definitely panicked. An elderly man, Mr. Henderson, who had lived here for 50 years, stood up first. "We've had enough," he announced, his voice trembling with years of pent-up anger. "Margaret, under your leadership, this HOA has gone from a simple community association to some kind of dictatorship. You overstepped your bounds, cost us thousands of dollars, and nearly got us sued into the ground. Murmurs of furious agreement rippled through the crowd. Margaret tried to defend herself, stammering, "I was acting in the best interests of the community." "No," I called out from the back, slowly rising to my feet, my voice loud and clear. "You were acting in the best interests of yourself." Head snapped toward me. Margaret's face went white as a sheet. "Margaret tried to steal my land," I announced to the room. "She thought she could bully me, and when that didn't work, she tried to bury me in paperwork. But she failed, and now she's scrambling to clean up the mess she made." Margaret's lips pressed into a desperate, thin line. "You don't even belong here, Monroe. You're not part of this HOA." I smirked, letting the full weight of the truth sink in. "Oh, but I do, Margaret, remember? You forced my property into your jurisdiction, which means legally I get a vote." A ripple of shock and astonished realization spread through the room. The board members exchanged horrified whispers. Margaret had accidentally given her enemy the ultimate weapon. Someone motioned for the vote to begin. It wasn't even close. Hand after hand shot up in favor of removing Margaret from the HOA presidency. The final count was overwhelmingly against her. Margaret slumped in her seat, looking like a statue that had just crumbled under its own weight. The next day, I was back on the ranch when a massive moving truck pulled up to her house. She was stomping back and forth, barking orders at the movers, stripped of her power and her influence. And then she was gone. She lost everything she thought she was, and all she had left was an empty moving van. That evening, I got an awkward knock on my door. 3 board members stood there, looking nervous and defeated. "So, we've been talking," the younger one, Derek, said awkwardly. "Since Margaret's gone, we need a new president." To stabilize things, I narrowed my eyes. "Let me stop you right there. If you're about to ask what I think you're about to ask, the answer is hell no. Hear us out," a woman named Susan pleaded. "We know the HOA has been a disaster. We need someone strong, someone who won't let power go to their head." I crossed my arms, completely uninterested. "Still not interested." Susan stepped forward, her voice earnest. "Jack, if you become president, you could dissolve the HOA." That made me pause. "Say that again." "If you take over," she repeated, her eyes lighting up with hope, "you could vote to dismantle it entirely. No more fees, no more ridiculous rules. Just homeowners managing their own property, like it should have been from the start." I took a long, hard moment. The idea of running an HOA made my stomach churn, but the idea of permanently putting an end to their nonsense, that had potential, that was the ultimate destruction of the problem. I exhaled sharply. "Fine, I'll do it. But only on one condition." Derek nodded eagerly. "Anything." "I don't want to hear a single complaint," I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. "When I burn every single one of your HOA rule books." A week later, it was official. The Shadow Creek HOA was dissolved by unanimous vote. Homeowners were finally free. No more fines for a blade of grass that was an inch too tall. No more restrictions on paint colors. No more tyrannical power trips. And just like that, genuine peace returned to the neighborhood. To celebrate, I threw the biggest barbecue the ranch had ever seen. The smell of smoked brisket and mesquite filled the air. Beer flowed freely, and for the first time in years, people actually looked happy to be living here, talking and laughing without looking over their shoulder. As I stood by the grill, watching my neighbors actually form a real community, the kind that comes without dues or threats, I felt a deep, slow satisfaction. Curtis showed up late, grabbing a plate of ribs and shaking his head in amused disbelief. "You really did it, Jack," he said. "You destroyed an HOA, I smirked, flipping a rib. "Told you I'd fight dirty. What are you going to do with all your free time now?" he asked. I glanced toward the horizon, where my newly reinforced humming fences stood tall and unchallenged against the setting sun. The signs read, "Private Property," and everyone in the valley finally knew exactly what that meant. "Oh," I said, taking a long, slow sip of my beer, watching the golden light hit the prairie. "I'll think of something. My land was mine again. No one would ever take it from me. Not an HOA, not a bureaucrat, not a single soul. I had won. If you've ever had to fight a ridiculous power trip over your own property, hit that like button And let me know in the comments below, what was the most absurd thing your HOA ever fined you for? And do you think dissolving the whole HOA was the ultimate victory? Or should I have done more with that $200,000 bill? Let's talk about it.